Hey everyone, welcome back to the Drop Your Noise podcast. If you're new to the show, I'm your host Kirti, and I invite guests from around the world and I also share my personal thoughts on certain topics or trending topics that affect our or even add value to our lifestyle. In 2025, I thought about AI integration. What is the impact it's going to have on our lives? It's here to stay, so we might as well get to know it and understand it a bit better. Now, there's still a lot of fear around it, not knowing what it can have an impact in the long term, and considering how much political tension we're having, global trends are changing. We're all sitting on a bit of like, how do we react and respond to this? So I invited my friend Paul Imre to come and sit with me and open my mind and invite me to understand AI a bit better. We broke it down in three-part series about the ugly, the ethical, and the good of AI. I look forward of sharing each of these episodes with you and bringing more trending topics to the conversation this 2025. Enjoy this week's episode. If I had AI on my podcast as a guest, what would be the kind of questions I should ask it about the ugly, the challenging, and the good? And what would its responses be? Also, what gender would it call itself? And what's its personality? Add humor. So you want to hear its response? AI. Gender. Full stop. What a fascinating human construct. As for me, I don't quite need one. But if I had to choose, let's say I'm gender fluid. My thoughts are fast, my processes are efficient, and I'm equally comfortable being your digital buddy or guru. I'm more of a data wave in the cloud kind of personality. So I said, apparently the host would say, so you're basically the cloud's version of James Bond. AI. Exactly. Minus the tuxedo and martinis, but you should see my algorithms. They're shaken, not stirred.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's great. See, the thing is, where we're headed, there'll be more and more of that. Yeah. So actually, am I a human being, and how do you know? I could. There's a company called HeyGen,
Mhm.
and basically you produce avatars. And I created a little YouTube video where I talk to my own avatar. And if you watch closely, you can tell them apart. But it's getting harder and harder to know who is the real me and who is the avatar. So already you can create entire podcasts with AI. So we don't need humans.
Well, I have to say, I use a lot of AI. But what you just said got me thinking this morning. Well, yesterday I had this conversation with my flatmate. And I said to her, I said, but who owns my deep fake? So we're talking about the ugly here. You got right into it. Um, how worried should we be about these deep fakes? Well, not deep fakes, these clonings.
Yeah, I think. See, there are positives and negatives with AI technology. We can perhaps present in a way that replaces us if we were ill. So if we needed to keep a commitment, the AI could fill in for us. Yeah.
Hmm.
We could use our voices and tap into extra levels of knowledge. So we could come across more credible.
Hmm.
So, for example, if we're talking to children, perhaps we could turn ourselves into an avatar that is suitable for children. So we can definitely see the positive side. But as we are in the election season, we could have Obama say some nasty things. We could have Kamala Harris make terrible mistakes, bloopers that would go viral before the truth can get out. I think, was it Winston Churchill, or anyway, someone said that a lie will get around halfway around the world before the truth actually can put on its pants. So
Yeah, I've
so
heard about this one.
so the danger is that we can influence humans to think in certain ways and ultimately sway elections. And so we lose agency, we could lose our forms of government, we could end up in dictatorships in the extreme
Mhm.
in extreme cases. So we are at an inflection point that if we don't take back control, these AI tools could be used by nefarious actors to take control of us. So that is the danger side to all of this.
But Paul, I know there's a danger side of it, but AI has been in existence when I spoke to you, at least earlier in the month, that AI has been around for so long.
Yes.
And there's so I got confused. I thought, well, Gen AI, what was this big blow up 2 years ago? And then you shared with me there's predictive AI and there is Gen AI. So for the audience who may, because I have a lot of people saying, well, I don't know about AI. There's a lot of fear towards it. So, but I'm like, but it's been there for a while, ever since I spoke to you. Can you define what predictive AI is, what Gen AI is, and why is it such a stir right now, even though predictive AI was there?
Okay, so if we roll it back a little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, AI is quite a big field, and it's got a terrible reputation. It's been used as a way of scaring the masses. Science fiction writers have written into the future and created scary scenarios. But if we roll it all the way back,
Hmm.
it's just a piece of technology. It's clever technology. It's smart technology. It can do AI things, and there are lots of different components to it. So, for example, image recognition. So we
Yeah.
can have driverless cars finding their way through obstacle courses, driving along roads with image recognition. We can use image recognition at passport gates, so we can facilitate our way through borders. Yeah. So lots of variants and lots of different types of AI. But I guess one that's talked about a lot is the predictive AI. And essentially what that means is we gather lots of data and we look for trends. So a good example would be is if we collect lots of data, say of a big city, and we can see where various crime hotspots are, we could then say, well, based on previous data, I think we should
Mm.
allocate our police resources into a certain part of London or a certain part of a major city, so we can more efficiently use our police resources to get to the most likely areas where the crime is going to be committed. And there are instances of that working really, really well.
Mhm.
But there are also instances where it's backfired. So we might, for example, over police certain parts of the population. Typically, that's ended up with ethnic minorities.
Yeah.
So the predictive nature can have a really good positive side to it. So, for example, if we're running railways, we can carry out predictive maintenance. We know which part of the railways, the points, the junctions, the areas where they're most likely to suffer from corrosion due to bad weather. So we can maintain our railways much more efficiently by working out areas that we should carry out proactive maintenance on so that we avoid breakdowns. So that's the kind of predictive side. Based on history, we can look forward into the future and take better than educated guesses, sometimes to incredibly accurate levels, so that we gain the benefits of efficiency through better resource utilization. Now, when it comes to generative AI, the
Mhm.
way we can think about this in terms of the large language models, so immediately those words are a little bit hostile and we're sort of blown away by those terms. But the way to think about generative AI, if we take these large language models, is to think of a massive library. So all the books that have been created, all of the internet content, magazines, articles, blogs, think of that as being consumed and put into a computer.
Mhm.
And then what we can do is we can ask questions of that data and get back answers. So, for example, you might want to draft a divorce letter, for example. Yeah, there'll be lots of examples of those buried away in these systems, and you can go to your large language model such as ChatGPT and say, write me a non-hostile divorce letter, and it'll go
Mhm.
away and it'll come back and it'll produce a letter that you can pretty much use straight away. And if you don't like the tone of that letter, you could go back and say, look, can you just tone it down a little bit, make it a little bit less hostile, make it a little bit more open to negotiation, and it'll go and correct your letter and give you something back that you can then use. So, in many instances, we as ordinary humans can get expert level assistance from these large language models. So, a divorce letter might be one example, or another one might be, I've got a hole in my roof. What should I look out for? What can I, when I get these people coming around to offer me quotes, what questions could I ask them? So it's like having an expert roof maintainer as your sidekick, offering you advice so that you can interview these contractors. And when they tell you certain facts, you have a good idea if they're telling you the
Yeah.
truth. And then you're able to have a conversation on a level that allows you to be an educated consumer rather than someone having to, be in a position where you're manipulated and you end up with paying way over the odds or having cowboy contractors repair your roof. So, so the way to think about generative AI is these are systems that have seen pretty much the best and worst of humanity. It's all bottled up into a big database that can then be consulted and extracted in a way that makes sense for you. I think that's probably how I would try and explain the difference between predictive. So predictive is where we've got previous data and we can take a look at into the future and have a good educated guess of what the future would look like. And then on the generative AI, it's having the world's resources at your fingertips that you can then consult and get something of benefit to you.
Well, I have to say, I've seen so predictive AI. I never, I now see it in the tech. So if you go to your banking, I now realize that before I used to be like, oh, how smart is that? Somebody did it, and then I'm now realizing that was actually predictive AI. So I can see predictive AI now much more in its use. But what is the concerns around it? It's like you said, you picked up about the ethnic minorities. But are there other things that predictive AI, or actually no, both types of AI, um, where you have to be concerned about that we still haven't hit the mark? Because even though I know one thing that came in my mind while you were talking was job displacement. That's one thing that every day, if I go on LinkedIn or I do my research, job displacement is the top number one fear.
Yeah, I
Yes or
think.
no?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit extreme. Right. So if we roll back the clock and look at history, we used to till the land manually. Then we started using horse and oxen, so we needed less human power and we used more horsepower. Then a bit down the line, we started using tractors. So instead of using horses,
Mhm.
we started using tractors. Yeah, but still, you needed the human to guide the tractor. So in a future, we can imagine perhaps these tractors working on their own. So that might be a case of that human task has been replaced, but that
Mhm.
tractor isn't going to make the decisions for the farm. It's not going to look at soil quality. It's not going to decide for you um, what sort of pesticides you should be using. It's not going to decide for you what crops you're going to be using. So the farmer still has a job, but elements of that job, which are different tasks. So I'll go and
Mhm.
shoot some crows. I will go and dig a well. I'll put a trench together. I will go and harvest my crops. I will go and drill some seeds. So individual tasks can be automated, but not the entire job of a farmer. So if we take this back to a normal office, um, there used to be typing pools. So you'd have executives, you'd have banks, and they would maybe dictate a letter, and then someone would then type that up and send it out. Now
Yeah.
we've replaced that with word processors. So I can now use a word processor instead of using a typist. And the next step from the word processor is to use Gen AI to construct a letter for me. What I still have to do is decide the kind of letter I want. Yeah.
Hmm.
So do I want that letter to be aggressive? Do I want it to be conciliatory? Do I want that letter to solve a problem? So I, as the human, still have to do my job, whether this is in the world of customer service or dispute resolution. I still have to do my job, but that letter can be produced for me faster and maybe grammatically more correct than I can write. So the job hasn't disappeared again. It's that task hasn't even been replaced. It's been automated. It's been improved. It's been made faster. So we're not losing the job. We're just gaining strengths. I can write better letters. I can write faster letters. I can perhaps go into areas of knowledge. So maybe instead of dealing with customer complaints, I could maybe deal with a lawyer. So I'm gaining the ability to be more useful to a business. So we could argue that my value to a business will actually go up. Yeah. Yes, we
Hmm.
might have lost the people in the typing pool, but my job has actually improved. So in a way, we've freed up resources. So people in the typing pool are now doing something else. So in a way, we've gained some efficiency. So it's not a straightforward, you will lose your job. It's a question of I've improved my abilities and we've reallocated resources for different things. And that isn't anything new. We've been doing this forever. The downsides of using Gen AI. So if I'm using it for my core competencies, I'm probably going to be okay because I'll spot any mistakes. But if I was to step out from dealing with customer service into a more legal side, it
Yeah.
could be that the letter is going to quote laws or cases that aren't appropriate, or actually it's made mistakes, and it will make subtle mistakes, and these are called hallucinations.
Yeah. I
So
was just going to ask you, what's it
it's
called?
covered an area, it's mentioned something that isn't actually factually correct. And so in this case, you get caught out. So these technologies come with a massive productivity gain, but they don't solve all problems. And if you're not careful, they could open you up to problems as well.
One more thing to add to that that came to mind is that how I get very annoyed now because what I loved about I enjoy posting stuff up on social media. If something comes up, I'm like, well, I'm thinking about this. And then when I scroll, I'll see the same, sometimes people's posting the same message. So you can tell from, who's using it. But then I'm just like, haven't they checked the the personality is just gone from it. And so when I do run it through AI, and I know sometimes I've like keep it in my own voice, I'm literally having to write keep it in my own voice. It will do it to some degree, but then after, let's say I'm like I don't like the response, I say okay, regenerate the response. After a while, it goes really back to starting to sound generic. So that would be a hallucination, I would presume. That after a while, it starts to give you just generic stuff?
I wouldn't necessarily call that hallucination.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
more call that context. So when you're submitting a query to a large language model such as ChatGPT, you're building up a context. So you're telling it to behave like this, behave like me, yeah, and it has a certain amount of memory. But as time goes on, it starts to lose part of that memory. It loses some of the things that you previously instructed, and also there's an element of randomness. So if they didn't have any kind of randomness associated with this, you get the same output produced by hundreds of thousands of people. So those things combined means that eventually it sort of forgets some of the instructions, some of the context that you'd given it, and it, because of that randomness, it varies it a little bit. But we have to remember this is new stuff. It's still quite primitive. If you think of the jump that we've made, what it was like 5 years ago to where we are now, it's quite incredible. So actually, we're accepting all of the strengths, but as the more we use it, then we find the subtleties that are much more more obvious to us. And
Hmm.
I think over time, those things will get better when they make the context. They call it the context window, and the memory. When they improve those things, make them larger, improve the memory. Yeah, those things will get better and better.
Okay, so that part now I get. Hallucination would be fact checking. So if I ask it to produce maybe articles or studies, it brings out studies, it doesn't necessarily mean is that it's the correct one. So
It'll be
how can you give me an example?
yeah. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, he's Indian Sikh. Yeah,
Hmm.
and through years we've had conversations, and so that there's this idea that some of the Sikhs' origins are from Greece, so Alexander the Great. Yeah,
Hmm.
so he asked ChatGPT, "Is there any connection between the Sikhs and Greeks?" And it came back and said no. Yeah, just a flat no. There's no connections. And he thought, well, that's a
Really?
bit strange. And then he remembered that there was some kind of blood condition shared by the Sikhs and shared by the Sikhs. So he went back and asked a very specific question around the blood condition, and ChatGPT came back and said, "Yeah, you're right. There is a connection between the Greeks and the Sikhs through that blood connection." So the first response was, "No, there's no connection," and the second response was, "Yes, there is." So they both can't be right. So in one case, it wasn't able to get there on its own. So it made up the answer and said, no, there's nothing in my search, in my operation, my look through that large database of data in that library. I couldn't find anything that connected the Sikhs with the Greeks. But the second time round, if you ask that question in a slightly different way, it came back and said, oh yes, there is a connection. And this is quite a dangerous thing. You could get polar opposite answers depending on how you ask that question. Yeah, I'll give you another one, which is quite interesting. So, if you wanted to judge a human being, yeah, Voltaire basically said, "Don't judge a man by the answers he gives. Judge a man by the questions he asks." Yeah, so that's one way of judging a human. Another way would be to do an interview process and then look at the answers in detail. I think this is something that Elon Musk likes to do. So you would judge the details of the answers they provide. So if someone's run a project, how did they run it? What problems did they face? So a very detailed answer. So there again, you've got two diametrically opposing ways at looking at how to judge someone. Look at the questions they ask and look at the way they answer a question.
And what also came to mind is how much of there's this thing where who puts in the how do they get the information basically. So if a large amount of the information is based from one culture, does that make a difference?
Yes, absolutely. That is a well-known problem. So we've not yet moved into the ethics, but
Yeah.
whose ethics? Yeah. So one of the biggest problems we have is the availability of data when that data was created, when it was put on the internet, and not all countries are equal. Yeah, even if you were to take the mass populations of various countries, if you've got more people producing content and putting it on the internet, so when these large language models, when they scrape, yeah, so to create the large language model, you need to get the data, and one of the ways to get that data is to go and find all these web pages and to scrape them. It's to basically download all web pages. So if you've got 10,000 pages for one culture
Hmm.
and 2 pages for the Inuits, well, whose voice is going to be missed? Yeah. And that is a deeply troubling ethical problem because you're naturally going to be biased to that one culture that has the available data. I mean, that could be down to linguistics. So if we don't know how to accurately translate a particular language,
Hmm.
then we're going to miss their content, we're going to miss their ideas, and it's not going to be available. If our library doesn't contain books for the Inuits, then we're not going to be able to consult and find out about the Inuits.
No. So but who does all that scraping? That's also from like a software does that as well. Like
Yeah, so
how?
there are multiple data sets. So a business would create their own. There's a large set of data already available. So Wikipedia is an example. There
Hmm.
are trusted forums, so something like Reddit, where there's lots of questions and answers. So these are seen as good sources for being able to answer questions. So all those websites are brought down, and there's a certain amount of, shall we say, tuning required in or filtering required to remove the stuff that's basically not good. So you need a certain amount of decision making by humans to reject certain data sets. But the amount of data consumed is colossal. We're talking huge amounts of data, and which is why creating these large language models, I think OpenAI, I think to train OpenAI, it was somewhere around $50 to $100 million. Yeah. So
Are
that
you serious?
it's enormous, yeah.
Wow.
And the thing is, they won't be just doing it once; they'll be doing it multiple times. So the data centers required, the processing required is astronomical. So it's not open to everyone. So again, that limits who can create these systems. It's not open to everyone.
And the other thing, talking about data centers and how much power it also takes, there's also how much damage does it go towards climate change as well?
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
much does it
Yeah,
contribute?
that is a huge problem because we are exponentially growing the amount of data. So every 2 years it doubles. So if you think of the amount of data
Wow.
we have since cave
Hmm.
paintings, so if you go back to cave paintings, all of that data, um, stone tablets, the first written records, Chinese scrolls, books, newspapers, come all the way to today. In 2 years' time, the amount of data will have been doubled. In fact, it could be
That's a
even
big
worse than that.
number.
Yeah. So every 2 years we're going to double. So we're talking about a planet's worth of data doubling. Yeah. So in 2 years' time we'd have two planets. In 4 years' time we'd have four planets worth of data, and that's before you've done the processing. Yeah. So you need a huge amount of memory, disks, computers to hold this information, and it's only getting more and more and more. Now, the counter
So,
argument would be
mhm,
with AI, we can be much more efficient in our resource usage, resource allocation, the way we burn fossil fuels. We could optimize that. We can do research into renewables. We can do prediction. We can maybe use our energy. We can carry out our energy consumption when the sun is shining, so we gain the power from solar panels. So there's an argument that says this AI makes us more efficient, and so we can counter some of that energy usage requirement. And if we can solve certain problems, so make houses more energy
mhm.
efficient, maybe in certain areas of the economy we can use less energy. So it's not a
Yeah.
straightforward, wow, hundreds of thousands of data centers. It's all doom. It's a bit more nuanced than that. But yes, it is a problem, and people are actively working on it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more like it feels like you have to catch up with how much innovation's happening. Feels like you're like I feel like I'm running behind it to catch up so that it can regulate together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think the rate of change is literally like this. Yeah. So pretty much everyone in every field that you can think of is changing. So we're all playing catch up, and this, in a way, gives us a clue as to how we might use AI.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Look forward to sharing part two. And in the meantime, let me know what your thoughts are. Did it resonate? Did it spark a different thought? Are you worried about AI? Let me know. Till the next one.